Awesome. Well, I am so thrilled to chat with the two of you and pick your brains and, for all the hopeful writers out there. My sister company is Writers Digest. So I feel like this information is going to be very useful for their side of the world as well, more so than screenwriters. But I think there's going to be like a happy medium there, the crossover, which we can dive into. So yeah, I'll try to keep this short and sweet. I usually try to do these no more than 20 minutes. And I know you guys are busy. So yeah, short and sweet. So just diving in, and it's cool that you guys are both on different coasts because you're seeing different things. What is it about, or when did Reddit become this beacon of where you can find authors, find IP, and just find great stories? And I'll start with you, Liz, on that.
Sure. I do want to specify, because Reddit could be described as the underbelly of the whole internet, that it's a very specific page for which these writers come from. And it is the No Sleep subreddit, which is the horror page. And the rules of this page is the stories must be written in first person as if they are true. The reason I offer that sort of preamble is in the late fall of 2018, there was a story called The Patient Who Nearly Drove Me Out of Medicine. And that, I feel, we didn't actually represent that. We don't represent that writer, that story. We work with the manager who does. I think that was a pretty cataclysmic moment for the idea that we could be finding otherwise undiscovered IP and convert them into something else. That story is significant because it not only sold for film, it sold for publishing. And in the years since, we at Verve have, of course, worked with that model, but we've also really focused on what is one of the few things that's nearly impossible to teach for a writer, and that's voice, the ability to transport a reader. And for something to get upvoted on Reddit and go viral, it's all voice. And because we are so interested in repping careers here, we've really gone in saying, let's find the voice, we'll teach everything else. So in that, we wanted to create a business that wasn't just find a story, sell it for film. We wanted to find a story, find the person behind the story, and get them on the road to a full-time writing career.
Yeah, it's nice to have like a really hooky title, which is great, but yeah, the voice carries everything. How often are you hoping that the author of this original piece is also going to carry over and, writing the screenplay or writing the TV pilot, or do you kind of try to match them up with someone who's been in the business a little bit longer and has that career that can maybe impart some of that wisdom on them and get them going?
I think the model is both. I think we can use a really fun, debut story like this to kick off a business on the publishing side of things. But when it comes to film and TV, sort of introducing this story and this writer to the market under sort of the watchful eye of someone who's maybe been doing it previously to kind of get them in the door. And then in success, we set them up for not only selling more stories, but having them be an actual player on the film and TV development side. So I think it's both.
Yeah. And I'm curious, are you also, because I've seen, some of the deals that you guys made recently, which is phenomenal. And I think it's like this unspoken thing that we don't really hear about in the writer's realm of you could actually make money doing this. But do you find yourselves packaging this material if you find, the IP that you like, okay, we could get a producer on board with this writer and get it going?
Absolutely. Again, as Noah said, it's going to be bespoke no matter what, because every story is different, and if our first So our first person involved is the writer of the story. We have to take their goals, aspirations, and values into consideration. There's some who see this as their ticket into the Hollywood writing space. There are others who see it as their ticket into the publishing space. For those who see it into their ticket into publishing, meaning that their main priority is, I want to write books and I want to be in the horror space as an author, then we will use their story then as the basis to help them build relationships, which is producers, screenwriters, directors, getting that story set up in the most optimal way for that original writer to feel like I've made an impact. So we do, it's rare that we're selling something clean, as with a lot of underlying IP, those perspectives of what a writer or director or producer might see helps amplify the story itself. But we also are driven by the core writer, very much so. We're not like, thanks so much, you wait here, we'll be back.
Right. And that's what I love about Verve as a whole. Like I've had a chat with David Boxer-Baum, and just like what you guys are doing and how just your relationships with your creatives, you aren't just like, you're just the agent that's there to sell things. Like you're there to really be like a shepherd, and like you're kind of not necessarily managing, but you are there to help them, you know, grow and kind of see what's right for them, rather than telling them this is where you're going in this box and this is what must be done. If you want to make money, you're like, no, this is what's comfortable. Let's work on this. And you can find their potential before they could see it, which is like a hard thing to do. Yeah, I would just love to talk about like that process for the two of you when you're working with an author who is maybe taking that first step into, you know, becoming a screenwriter, or like, hey, actually, I just want to be an author. How do I communicate with a screenwriter or a TV writer?
Well, I think what's fun what we've built on the IP side of things is almost being story and writer driven and sort of platform agnostic. You know, we're in a space now where if something's a cool idea, it's a cool idea. And then having a really open dialogue with, you know, a potential writer about like what, just as Liz was saying, like, what are your goals here? You know, where do you see yourself living in that marketplace? And it's so much easier to kind of figure that out instead of being, you know, oh, well, now we have to get a film person involved. Oh, now we have to get a TV person involved, like whatever it happens to be. Just looking at a story as, you know, intellectual property that can live in one space to start, or it can live in many spaces to start. And I think that's, you know, what's exciting for a writer working with us is that we have their goals in mind, but then we are so agnostic to the way of putting that story into the world that they can kind of do whatever they want.
We also offer them a really clear roadmap of what means what. So on the publishing side, editors aren't that into buying short stories that get turned into novels. You know, that functionally is an uphill battle for an agent, which means that we need something that pushes the story up the hill. That's where a major feature deal or a big TV deal on the LA side, or film and TV side rather, really helps that. So we will say, hey, you wrote this incredible story, it's gone pretty viral, and your main goal is to be published here on this bookshelf. So we actually do need to work on this side, on the film and TV side first, because we know how to make this a little bigger so that when it comes to us presenting you to the publishing community, there's some buy-in. At the same time, while we're doing our job, and this is with the assumption that the writer is not already a screenwriter or interested in being pilot of that. While we're helping build the elements on the film and TV side, we've also set this writer up with their action plan of what they need to do before we go to the publishing side. They need to write out a full synopsis of what the book's going to look like. They need to write a plan of how they see the story turning into a book, because then when we're getting to submission to editors, we not only have the work we've done on the film and TV side, we've also set the author up for success by saying, and this is exactly how I'll do it, which is getting us closer to a proposal on the nonfiction side. So nonfiction editors are very used to buying projects on proposal, and it's making sure that no matter what direction we're in, film or TV or publishing, we as the agents are speaking in our destination home language.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it makes total sense. It's that business sense that I think a lot of writers unfortunately don't have, because we're so focused on the craft and the story, but it's so important to have all those things lined up. So like with that said, when, say I have something on Reddit and it's now going viral without me, like I had no intention, it just happened because I had the voice and it's happening. Is that when I should start thinking about, okay, I should have that synopsis ready. I should have, what is my plan? Knowing that there's people like you out there who are watching these threads, or like, you have your finger on the pulse of what's trending and what's not trending, that, I may get a knock on the door, from one of you guys, and, should I be ready to go? Or is that something that I should just be ready to just be open to how to like formulate all of that and develop that with your team?
I think that if you are a writer putting something out on Reddit, you focus on what you're putting out, knowing that cream rises to the top. As you just said, a lot of writers don't have the business and strategic thinking that agents do. They don't have to have it.
Mm-hmm.
I wouldn't burden yourself with the guesswork of writing a publishing plan, because if you focus on getting the very best story out there, then exactly the person who's knocking on your door, they should tell you what to do next. I think the one thing you have to have in your mind, though, is, do you want this to live somewhere else or as something else? Because I think that's where writers can get the most tripped up, is not knowing what they want for a story and getting carried into the wave, and then getting all the way to a book deal and being like, I don't actually want to do this for 400 pages.
Right. Fair enough. And Noah, you're definitely like in the land of like the stereotype of like, this is where authors live. It's not very much like an LA thing. It's very Hollywood. But there is now like that nice crossover that we talked about. But for you, what, are you seeing more authors now noticing platforms like a Reddit, being like, maybe I should be putting my short stories or something on here to maybe, catch someone's attention like yourself, to then have that foot in the door?
I think we are seeing a blurriness sort of occur between how fiction and nonfiction are acquired. Just like Liz just referenced, typically on the nonfiction side, that book is sort of the capstone of a body of work. You're already kind of known in a particular space. The story's maybe been told in a magazine or gone viral in some place like that. You kind of have the platform to be telling this thing and being an expert, whether it's, about some historical event or whether it's your own lived experience. And I think that we're seeing that now on the fiction side, where we're trying to find opportunities to get our writers out there and develop their voices in a way where people kind of already recognize them before the submission is made. And I think Reddit's just a good way for, the potential readers out there to connect with, as Liz said, I guess, that strong central voice there. And then we can kind of come in and give that very tailored, plan of action to, well, how do we put a proposal together to get a publisher interested? Well, how do we find, a supervising kind of writing partner for you to get your foot into production companies and studios and end users like that? So yeah, I think that as much as writers can be doing to just have their work out there, whether it be fiction or nonfiction, it's about building that profile, building up your resume, so to speak.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. For those of us that aren't aware of the process, like myself, what is there a typical process of just, once you've been in touch with a writer, you're like, hey, like, let's go, let's do this. Like there's magic happening here. Do what is that relationship like with, like maybe an editor or the publisher, and then just setting up these deals with maybe even a production house? What is like the kind of like game plan that you use that's kind of like your model? Because I know it's different for every writer that comes through Verve, but yeah, is there just like a typical, like, this is the way it usually goes for smooth sailing?
I think it depends on, the particular writer and their goals, but I think what Liz and I have a lot of fun doing is really just diving deep and rolling our sleeves up and saying, okay, you have this unteachable voice here. How do we create a set of materials or a package or whatever it happens to be to get editors and to get producers interested in the material? And I think that's, putting your best foot forward is always kind of the best way to do that. And whether that means challenging writers to put a little bit more on the page, as Liz says, like presenting a map for what a book length project would look like, or if it's, sort of building up a profile in other ways. Yeah, I think that's kind of the bespoke approach that we have to, each and every one of our clients.
And I'll say this is a little bit more on the Hollywood side of things. Something that makes Verve pretty special is how integrated we are as an agency.
Mm-hmm.
In our weekly publishing meeting, it's actually called our weekly IT meeting, because we have agents from publishing, media rights, and audio representing the IT team. But in addition to that, we have a packaging agent on the feature side, and we have a packaging agent on the TV side joined. Plus, we have an agent from the nonfiction side, plus all of our assistants. And the value of a room that big, in which we go over material every single Monday, is a meeting of the minds. We're working with this piece of material. How should it live? What should it look like? And who else within the walls of Verve should read it? And we leave that meeting with an initial action plan of, we're going to take this story and we're sending it to these 5 agents who work in these 5 spaces that we think they're going to have some pretty good ideas. There's no siloed project at Verve, and the Reddit business fits exactly into that, because even if it is originating in the IP space, we know that our job is to help this story live on.
I love that. I just to be a fly on the wall in those meetings with you guys, just to hear what you're doing. Like, yeah, it's like you guys are doing like God's work in there. Yeah, they always say, don't write to trends, but I feel like the adaptation space is really booming, and like over the last 5 years, we've seen so many great novels and short stories and so forth just being adapted into these great TV series or films. Do you think that's mostly partly because of the boom that we've seen with all the streaming services, or do you think that's just something that people are craving as an audience? They just they read a great book and they're like, I would love to see this come to life, and you guys are like, we're on it.
I mean, I think with an underlying piece of material, you sort of have a roadmap in a way that you may not with a pitch or a spec script, just to sort of creating a larger world. And I think particularly on the horror side, like streaming is great, sure, but I think even in traditional box office, you're seeing what's fueling the market, and what people are going to see is big tent poles, sequels and prequels. And then the things that are really kind of rising to the top are horror things. They're relatively, comparatively inexpensive to make. They're high concepts, and people seem to really, enjoy those kinds of stories. And I think we're seeing a lot of really interesting filmmaking happening with those kinds of stories. So I think when we look on the development side of it, If you have a cool piece of material, and then you're kind of, we're being a little bit producers, on this too. What's attractive to some of our high level people attaching to these kinds of things is, hey, this is an opportunity to do something really cool and exist in a space where, audiences are demonstrably there.
Yeah, totally. Well, last question, and this one's kind of just a fun one. Just knowing your careers, and you've had a very successful careers on both the ends, and just shepherding writers and storytellers, what got you excited, interested in becoming agents and doing what you do now? And has it like fulfilled that like creative dream for you too?
I love business as much as I love books. And I love stories more than both of those things combined. So agenting felt like a pretty holistic answer to serving those three passions.
Yeah.
I think Liz and I are both maybe writers at heart. I mean, Liz successfully and me just in my wildest dreams. But being able to, like you said, craft is what's important to a lot of the writers, coming into the industry, and giving a space to those writers to really focus on craft and then have that objectivity, but also that sensitivity to be like, there's a lot that's unpleasant that's in this business. And it's about figuring out strategically, what are your goals here? And even walking through people who don't know what their goals are yet, kind of being able to present what the world could potentially look like and what is realistic in a way that does create that hard line between this is your safe creative space, but then you have an ally with someone like us who can go out and talk about your work in the marketplace in a way that is respectful to the thing you ultimately want to be doing with your career. So yeah, that's to me like being the thing that I want to be, like, see in the world. That's kind of fun, and seeing that having those conversations when deals do work out with our clients. It's incredibly rewarding.
Yeah, I'm sure. Well, you guys have very cool jobs, and congrats to like all the hard work that you've done over the last couple of years, and just changing a lot of lives, a lot of small writers who are like becoming big names, which is really cool. And I love to see that. So thank you so much for this conversation. I think it's gonna be really useful for a lot of writers, and I'm definitely gonna share it with my Writer's Digest team. And yeah, I think this is really cool. There's a lot of hope and opportunity out there, which is really cool, in different ways that we haven't seen in a long time. So it's really cool that you guys are definitely, changing with the tides and using it to your advantage of helping writers. So thank you guys. Yeah.
Thank you. We're a huge fan of Script.
Huh.
We know you've loved Verve before, so thank you for loving us again.
Yeah, of
We
course.
love you.